Welcome to Great Northern Cascade Division in N-Scale. I wanted to do a video that I hope was going to be a little bit more positive. It was about the Digitrax SE74. So this is a really cool device that can control the state of switch machines like Torus point motors. We've got one of those hanging around, fairly common. It can also do solenoid-based point motors, sub-based point motors, things like that. But the idea with the SE74 is that you can plug the switch machines in and it can control them. You also then have some other pins where you can hook up manual push buttons if you want to have something like on a fascia around by your layout. It does also have some sensor pin in, so if you've got block detection stuff set up, you can figure out the state of that and have the Digitrax unit control all of that. Most importantly, and what I was really interested in it for, was for signaling. And so the idea is that you can hook up, I think it's up to 16 LEDs on 4 different signal driver cables, so you can have a bunch of different LEDs connected to it. I forget exactly how many it was. And so the idea that I was wanting to have with these is that for each of my turnouts that I would have on the layout, it would be cool to have signal lights to show both the approach on the main line, and then on the other side, either the main line or the siding that's coming off of the diverging route, have the SE74 basically act as a single box where I can plug in my switch machines, and I'm pretty much going to be using the Circuitron Tortoise switch machines. Just plug those straight in. I don't have to worry about figuring out power to them separately. Have a way that I can just put 2 wires into this for a push button fascia if I want manual control. But the kind of advantage of this is that it then gives you DCC addressing of everything. So this is the basic Tortoise switch machine. We're going a little bit away from the SE74, but bear with me. This is the basic Tortoise switch machine. A lot of people, at least in the US, use this. You can also, like I say, use solenoid-based point motors, servo-based point motors, and things like that. And that's great if you just want basic manual control, but then there are DCC versions of this, in fact, called the Smell. It's about an extra $10, and it has a little DCC chip inside of it. Now, NCE do have the switch cats as well, which do a similar thing. It basically has DCC addressing to a more manual-based machine. DCC Concepts have the same thing. They have a way that they give you DCC addresses based on that. And the SE74 will do that as well. And so the idea that I had was, okay, cool. JMRI would then know the state of this, or LocoNet just in general. Other Digitrax devices would know the state of what my turnouts are, or from my DCC throttle. If I didn't want to do the push buttons, then I would have a way to be able to control them. Now, I'm not going to have large operating sessions with a dozen different people here. I'm not going to have a dispatcher sat at a computer screen with a full CTC representation in front of them, dispatching trains and able to control all the different turnouts. That just doesn't interest me. Rule number 1, it's your railroad. If that's what you want to do, more power to you. I think they're really, really cool, but for me, I just don't want to spend the time and effort and money in doing that. But it would be cool to at least have that DCC ability for those switch machines, to have JMRI understand the state of it, so that I could do some more advanced signaling in the future based on block detection. But really right now, for the platforms behind me in King Street Station and Union Station in Seattle, what I wanted the SE74 to do was control those turnouts, give me some push buttons so I could manually throw them if I wanted to, and then control all the state of those different LEDs. Where I kind of went wrong, and I'll talk about it a little bit more as we get into this, this is really 2 different devices in one box. It will control switch machines, it will control LEDs. There's no logic in this that lets you do it. So that's kind of the quick and dirty version that I would say about this. There's a ton of really good long form videos that get into way more of a kind of a tutorial based approach on how you can configure all of this. But really, if you're looking at just basic signaling, then honestly, just wire your signal straight into the Tortoise or whatever else you have. Have it set up some kind of relay, if it's a basic solenoid or servo-based switch machine, some kind of reed switch that would be able to control the lights. This will not do it for you. It will control LEDs, but there's no logic inside the SE74 that I can find, but please correct me if I'm wrong on this. There's no logic in here that says, based on the state of whatever the turnout is that I've connected, whatever the switch machine is I've connected, now change the status of the LEDs. And in fairness, it was probably my misunderstanding. It could get way more complex than that. The SE74 doesn't know, do you have a 2-aspect signal, do you have a 3-aspect signal, or a 4-aspect signal? You know, how are you wanting to have those LEDs set? Are you wanting to look at block detection as well? There are some companies that do make devices that pretty much do what I want. They are expensive as well. There's still quite a bit of complexity in the setting, the different jumper switches on them, and it's really more than I was wanting. It doesn't then give you the DCC control of any of the lights. It doesn't connect back into JMRI in quite the same way. And you know, if I'm going to start going down various different DIY routes, then I can knock that together myself with an Arduino way cheaper than anything commercially I can buy. I hope that I could stay Digitrax and the SE74 would do that. This will come in useful on some instances, like on some mainline running where I do have block detection, or like for a turnaround loop where I do have block detection. But for the most part, this really didn't meet my expectations. It's an expensive device for what it is, really. I feel like Digitrax kind of had an opportunity to make signaling really easy for people, and that they could have just assumed, okay, Digitrax will quite happily sell you a signal pack of 3 signals, which we'll look at. It's basically an A1 and an A2 set of 3-aspect signals that will be on the main line coming into a turnout, and then 2 sets of 3-aspect signals that you would then put on the other side of the turnout to show either the main line or the siding, the diverging route that comes off it. And so in my mind, it should have been fairly easy to have some logic built into this that says, okay, I'm just going to default that this is what you're doing unless you give me an ops command that turns off that default behavior. You know, Digitrax defaulted that this actually is set up for solenoid-based point motors, and so you have to give an ops command out the box to make it work with those slow motion switch machines like Tortoise, which arguably are one of the most common ones that are used in the US. So I feel like Digitrax missed the mark a little bit for a device that's $90 to $100. So let's look at it a little bit more. It is still interesting. It doesn't meet my needs for what I'm doing here on the stations, but it will probably come in useful in some instances a little bit further down the road. And then I'll probably do another video where I just do some of that basic signaling with LEDs straight on the Tortoise. But let's take a little bit of a look at the SE74, what it can do, and then some of the failings of it as well. Okay, so this functionally is everything that we are going to use to control one turnout here on Great Northern and Cascade Division. And I wanted to do this video just to kind of show how the Digitrax SE74 unit can control these Tortoise slow motion switch machines from Circuitron. These are very, very common switch machine that is used to control turnouts. But also wanting to really get into the signaling part of it, which is really how this all comes together. The problem that I'm trying to solve here, and that most people are trying to solve here, is that what you want is a way that you have some kind of switch machine that can control the turnout, so you don't have to kind of hand of God come down and move the turnout left and right. So the switch machine takes care of that. You want somewhere to then power the switch machine and be able to send it commands, and you could do push button, but with the SE74, it basically gives you DCC control of these Tortoise switch machines without having to use the smells. So the smells, it's the exact same thing, but it has a DCC decoder built in. It adds about $10 to the cost of the switch machine. And so if you didn't really care about signals, but you still want to have DCC control, that might be one option that you could go. But if you're going to be using the SE74, you can save yourself the $10 a piece by going with the smells. And so the SE74 controls up to 4 of these switch machines. That gives you a $40 saving. You're at, you know, almost half the cost of what this SE74 is. So, you know, one thing to bear in mind, don't use smells with an SE74, in my opinion. With an SE74, it's a waste of money. But with the turnout then, what you want is a way to be able to have some kind of signals. So very quick as an overview of what we're going to do here, we basically want to have 2 signals, something like this. Let's try and move it a little bit further down. It makes it a little bit clearer as to what we're doing. We want to have 2 kind of signals so that depending on which way this turnout is thrown, we would get red and green lights, to kind of let us know which way it's thrown. And so depending on which line we're coming in here from the turnout, are we good to go? And then on the other side, what you have, well, typically you would have kind of a double signal mast like this that sits there, kind of faces the other way, and so then as the trains come in, then they know which way is this turnout thrown, and so which route are they going to go on? Are they going to continue on the main line, or are they going to come off on the siding? So that's what I'm trying to, figure out the control of, and that's why I've kind of gone with the Digitrax SE74, because built in, it's got all of that control. You either use push button controls that you can wire in here. It lets you do switch sensors. It then connects into the tortoise switch machine over here, so you don't have to wire this the switch machine up separately to some kind of auxiliary bus. The SE74 will send power out to the switch machine, and then either by pushing a button, it will throw the turnout, or you can send the DCC command from your regular controller, and that will then throw the turnout. All the integrated logic is also then built in that depending on which way that turnout is thrown, it will then update all of these 3 signal masts appropriately. I do then have some little terminal strips that would make it a little bit easier to then wire these in if you wanted to. Because of how I'm doing it, it's not really necessary, because they already have these kind of built in. These 3 signals are the SN ABC signal masts that you can get directly from Digitrax. And so they have a little printed circuit board on the bottom that makes it really easy to hook up to the ribbon cable. But these terminal strips might become more useful if you're using a different kind of brand, like Digitrax do these, CMtron, there's a couple of other places that you can get commercial signal masts that would then just wire straight in. These are just kind of the raw masts, like there isn't really, it's got all the electronic components to them and all the pins to them, but really you still need something that then you slide this into to actually make it visually look like a signal mast would do. But that's a video for another day when we figure out exactly how we're going to do that. In this one, let's see if we can start out by getting the SE74 connected into the tortoise point motor. And let's just go easy, and we'll just start with a basic push button just so we can make sure that the SE74 is going to be able to control this tortoise switch motor, switch machine, before we go and try and do anything with signaling. Alright, so we've got the SE74 hooked up to the tortoise point motor, and again, if you had a different point motor, it might be a little bit different, but the instructions from Circuitron, basically it's these 2 outside ones where the power goes in for this, and you then hook it up to the pins on the actual SE74. Now you do need to pay a little bit of attention because it's not quite as intuitive maybe as you would think. So do reference the actual instructions, which say that pin 1 is actually here on the right, and so as you would move left, you go point motor 1, point motor 2, 3, 4. It's the same with the momentary push buttons that we use. Pin 1 is actually up here in the top right, and when we come over here where we're actually going to put our signal masts in, it's pin 1 on the bottom right. You typically think go like left to right and then down, so you would think, point motor 1, point motor 2, 3, 4, or switch 1, 2, 3, 4, push button, switch 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not, it's inversed. I think it's because Digitrax want you to actually be looking at it that way, in which case it makes sense going left to right. There's more detailed videos that go into this. The other thing that you do need to think about if you're using the Circuitron tortoise point motors, again, it's all you write in the manual, so I don't know why it catches people out and why they're confused. It tells you that the default setting for the SE74 is for pulse solenoid point motors, which is where you send just a momentary burst of power. To control slow motion turnouts like the tortoise, you have to actually configure one of the settings. Again, the manual tells you exactly how to do that. Basically all you do is hold down the ops button for 3 seconds and it will flash, and then on your DCC controller you basically say turnout number 1, because it's in programming mode, turnout number 1, and then you want to close, send a close signal. C is for slow motion turnouts, and then go back and press and hold that up button for 3 seconds. Again, there's other videos that get much more in depth into how to actually configure addressing on the SE74 and stuff like that. All I wanted to do is go through some of the basics. So hooked up just a basic momentary push button into pin 1, and then this black cable is giving us our 5 volts of power, and so we can have up to 4 push buttons to control the turnouts. You might be thinking, okay, I've got 10 pins. It's because 4 of the pins, I think 1, 3, 5, and 7, allow us to press the momentary push button, and we can then change that going backwards and forwards. If we then wanted to do some of the block detection, then we can hook up sensors into pins 2, 4, 6, and 8. That will then send the signal back. But now we have just that basic control. We've got our tortoise hooked up. We know that that works. We know that we can press a push button, and we know that we can throw the turnout even though we don't have the wire connected or an actual turnout or anything like that. So the next thing then is going to be, let's try hooking up what they call the test signal mast. And we should see that the signal lights will change as we throw this turnout motor. So let's try that. All right, so I have gone on quite an adventure to be able to get here. And so this is really where the bulk of, I won't say that the failing of the SE74, my misunderstanding of the SE74 has come into play. So, you know, we had got the switch machine hooked up, we wired that in, and we got push button wired in such that, you know, we can press the button. If I move my hand out the way, and so you can see, okay, from the physical push button, the switch machine changes, and then the status of the lights are changing. And so this is what Digitrax call their lighting test board. And so it runs on a ribbon cable, holding the camera, so I can't really do it, but this little board slides out of the adapter, and you turn the lights around, and then it signals the other set of lights. So I think right now I've got this set for A1 and A2 lights. If we flip that around, then we would get B and C. And so really all it's doing is it's just a little test board that Digitrax makes sure that if you did then make up your own signal driver cables, and you did then hook up the 3 different lights individually by crimping in the separate sections and plugging your lights in, then whatever logic you have in place is working. So what I had hoped, what I had, I guess, misunderstood about the SE74 was that it would do this by itself. And you're saying, well, it is doing it by itself. No, it's not. This is where a number of hours and frustration came in. This part, you know, pressing the button to be able to switch, that part works. This is actually being controlled by JMRI. What I've come to understand is that basically the SE74 is 2 units in one, almost. We've got this right-hand side, I guess, where we've got the manual push buttons that are coming in over here, and we've got the switch machine connections over here. Like, the right-hand side of the unit is basically just for controlling that. It's for powering the switch machines, it's for throwing the state of the switch machines, it's for giving you a way to be able to manually push button do that, or hook in additional sensor. And so the right half of the unit is really just doing that. The left half of the unit, so then this side of the unit, is then basically just giving you an interface to be able to control lights. And so it's, in my mind, it's really just an expensive way to be able to wire up lights into a single power supply and then be able to address them from something like JMRI. There is no logic within the SE74 that does anything with lights, anything on this side of the device, anything with lights, based on what's happening on this side of the device with your switch machines and with your manual push buttons. I would say that that's a bit of a failing on the SE74 side. I think it's a bit of a miss on the Digitrax side, in that they came really, really close to having a device that made it very, very easy for people to hook up unless I'm completely missing something, and please in the comments let me know if I'm missing something really obvious here, but the more research I then did into this and the more I looked into this, I'm pretty sure that I just had incorrect assumptions on what this unit could do, and that I am now correct in this. The SE74 does not do anything with the lights based on the state of the turnouts or the sensors that you're telling it. All it's doing is acting as an interface back out to LocoNet using your LocoNet cable, so that if you had another device, really JMRI, monitoring the state of all of this, then you can use the addressing of the different lights to then be able to control all of these. And so rather than having to do more of a DIY electronic solution that I've done before, where basically you have an Arduino, little microcontroller Arduino connected, running some custom code, and I had it using CMRI, which then basically had shift registers to say, okay, I am essentially assigning pin outputs on the Arduino to certain lights, and so those pins through CMRI corresponded to lights in JMRI, and so technically you can then address lights from JMRI. There was a lot that went into that, and I'll do a whole other video that kind of gets into that, because I think what I want to do now is do a comparison between this kind of off-the-shelf solution, SE74, versus that DIY approach. I had hoped I was going to go everything Digitrax, and it was going to meet all of my hopes and dreams and expectations, and it hasn't. And so for very basic scenarios where I want to just have a turnout motor, control the state of a turnout, and then have lights that reflect that in a very basic and simple way, this will not do that. This is for kind of your next level. So let's pop up onto the layout and kind of see what I mean here. So if we take a look at Union Station, for example, you got the south side coming in on Union Station, and we have a turnout here. And so the Digitrax logic is that you would have the two signal heads, A1 and A2, that kind of face that way. And those lights, A1, the uppermost light, indicates the status of this main line, and that goes through. And then the A2 light indicates the status of the diverging route of the turnout. I might get some of this terminology wrong, but functionally that's what it's doing. The two lights are showing, is the turnout thrown, or is it open or closed? Then on the other side of the turnout, you would have one signal head here, another signal head here. And again, basically what they're doing is saying, if you're on this main line and you have a green light, then it means that this turnout is closed, and so you can come through on the main line, no problem. Conversely, if you're coming in from the platform or in from the diverging line, a siding, whatever that would be, and you have a green light here, red light would then be on the main line, a green light here, it means that the turnout is thrown, and so you are clear to progress through, and then you will join the main line, you will carry on south out the station. So I've got 3 platforms here on Union Station, and I have 4 platforms on King Street Station. They're the 2 main stations that would have been in Seattle. And so what I had hoped, what I kind of wanted to do was keep this fairly basic. I wanted to have some LEDs that would show transition states based on how the turnouts were thrown. And really I wanted manual control where we just have push buttons that would change that. I wanted the operator who's acting as engineer of that train, who's in control of the locomotives, to be able to stand and just manually push the buttons. And if there was a way that could connect in through the DCC controller, great. So if they wanted to, they could throw the turnouts based on DCC commands, but I didn't really care so much about monitoring the state of all of these different platforms. And in fact, the platforms are not set up for block detection. That was an intentional choice. That added complexity, it added time, and added cost that for me isn't necessary, isn't what I'm looking for. your railroad, you can do what you would like. Rule number one, it's your railroad. For me, this wasn't important. Now, outside of the stations, they are wired for block detection. I don't know how well we can come in close, but these are insulated rail joiners as you leave the station. The same on the one that goes out of King Street Station and all the way down there on the north side. Inside the station for the different platforms, no block detection. I didn't care about it. So, where I think the SE4 comes into play is really only if you're doing block detection. Because when you have block detection, what can then happen is, even if I say, okay, main line is coming through, turnout isn't thrown, and so any trains that are wanting to exit south would get a green light, and then they can go through. But if this block is actually occupied, there's actually already a train in here, you don't want that. You would technically want this signal to be red. The train cannot depart because there's something already in the block. Now, once the train is passed out and it's gone in the return loop, it's out of that block, the state of this block changes, and so the state of this light can change, can turn to green. Or if the train was coming in from the turnaround loop, it's heading north, it would come in, and again, I don't have block detection, which again is part of where this starts to fall down in basic operation, but I'm okay with that. This signal would be saying green even if the turnout was okay, and it was lined up to go straight through on the main line, even though there's a train here. And I was okay with that because I'm not going to be running large operating sessions with 4, 6, 8 operators. I am not setting this up for CTC, where you would have someone sat at a computer screen that is controlling the state of all this, so that it is dispatching locomotives. For the most part, it's going to be me, and maybe it's 1 or 2 other people. And so I'm okay with the fairly basic, low-tech way of doing this. And so really, I just wanted the signal lights to change based on how the turnout state is thrown. Now, maybe it's in the turnaround loop. I might want to have that set up. Again, this is wired for block detection. Turnaround loop will have block detection as well. And so maybe those signals, I could see, okay, the SE74, yes, if it is occupied, JMRI would know that. JMRI could control the state of that. But if we come to the very far platform in King Street Station, you will come through 1 turnout, you will come through 2 turnouts, and then finally down here, the 3rd turnout to get out. I don't care about having to configure everything in JMRI for these 2 turnouts just to be able to control the state of the LEDs. Whatever the state of the turnout, let it go, because even in the prototype, there would not have been multiple trains coming in and out of these stations at the same time. This wasn't Grand Central Station. In New York or Chicago or big cities, go back to places in Europe, King's Cross in London or something like that, Gare du Nord in Paris. And there was not, multiple trains in and out at the same time. The Empire Builder, was once a day in and out. Western Star, there was not a lot of trains that were going in and out, so I don't care so much about that kind of stuff. And that's where, at least for me, the SE74 kind of falls down. It makes it too complex. You have to do too much for that kind of basic signaling. That was my misunderstanding. And so what I'm going to end up doing is going to put the wires straight into the tortoise switch machine. And so the tortoise switch machine has 2 basically switch outputs. And so you can actually put the manual push button straight into one, and you can connect LEDs into another. And so then the switch machine completely controls that, just very basic electronics based on how the turnout is thrown. So rather than coming through the SE74, we'd wire in. And then as we push that button, the button straight into the switch machine changes, and then it changes the outputs that would do these lights. So SE74 is not what I expected it to be. Very basic control of switch machines, control of lights. It gives you the ability to basically do DCC addressing of all of that for how much it is. It's also very touchy if you don't decide that you're going to clean up the wires. Beyond that, I think it's a bit of a mess. I feel like Digitrax could have made this a very easy way for people to do it, because now I'm kind of torn in that if I don't do this for the basic control with JMRI and I just wire into the switch machine, then I don't have any ability for DCC addressing of the switch machine. I have no ability of DCCing of the lighting. I'm completely reliant on this. And so if in the future, if I do then decide to go back and, you know, make cuts in the rails to do block detection on all the different platforms, I really gain nothing from that because I don't have an SE74 controlling it. But for the price of these and for what I'm trying to do in and around these station platforms, this is too much. This is too complicated. This is too expensive. There are uses for this. This might be good on the man lines. This might be good on some small industries where I'm going to do some amount of block detection, and it would be good to have some amount of automation in, no, you have a red light, you're waiting because there's a train already in the next block, and once that train exits the block, okay, now you're able to go. So I will end up using these. You probably won't see videos on these in the future for a little while. Because I'm just not going to spend a lot of time fussing with this. Switch machines I'm going to put in the station area at some point. Lights I will put in the station area at some point. It's not really a super high priority for me, but I do want to make sure that I am correct in my assumption in how the lights will work. So I'll split it out into a different video because we're now moving beyond my thoughts on the SE74 here. Alright, so hopefully this was somewhat useful. The video got a little bit longer than I was hoping it was going to be. I was hoping that I was just going to be able to show you how you can quickly hook up a switch machine, how you can quickly hook up some LEDs and be up and running. But if you do want kind of more in-depth tutorial videos, Jim Worcester, I think is the name of the channel, has a 3 or 4 part series on doing this and gets way more into the JMRI side of things as well. How you set up the signal masts, how you set up the signal heads, how you do some of the logic, how you do some of the panels. Again, that's way more than I really want to do. I've done that in the past on previous layouts. Even though this is a huge layout, this is actually not the direction. That's not actually the direction that I'm going to take with it. Everything is going to be DCC, but I do not want to have to spend a bunch of time sat in front of a computer screen putting my entire track plan into JMRI just to be able to control the state of signals and things like that. But, you know, I did learn something from that. It is a cool device. It will have other uses here on Great Northern Cascades division. But for now, I think I've got a plan on how I want to do the signals just straight off the total switch machine. I'm going to do another video that gets a little bit more in depth on how you would go ahead and do that, because it is kind of an interesting thing to do, and it is actually fairly straightforward, and it takes away all the kind of cost and complexity of doing some of the Digitrax and DCC stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've got any experience with the SE74. Please let me know if I'm missing something, because again, before I go ahead and actually hook up everything, you know, I've got some time before I put all the signals in station, and so if there is some logic built into this SE74 that I'm just missing, it would be nice to give me the future ability to do a little bit more in JMRI, but you know, for how complex it is and how costly it is versus just wiring the LEDs straight into the Torre switch machine, you know, probably going to give it a miss for the station platform area. But I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please do subscribe, like, follow along, and all that kind of fun stuff, so you can see more on doing stuff with the Torre switch machines. I am also going to do a video where I kind of then go a little bit more into that nerdy DIY stuff on how you can control switch machines and LEDs, because I did that on the previous layout. I was hoping to avoid that by doing some of the commercial off-the-shelf Digitrax stuff, but I guess I'm going to have to do at least some of that for parts of this. Yeah, so look forward to a couple of those videos that are coming up. Right, see you later.